Hey everybody, Editing Phil here. What you were about to see is an example of a man with ADHD trying to do too many things at once. So I got a new camera setup, I got a new software, I got new lighting, I got new positioning, a new tripod, and then I was like, I'm going to put all that together for the first time ever and record my episode, but also I'm going to try doing it while live streaming on a platform where I've never live streamed before, not quite understanding how all of it works at the same time together, or if it even works at the same time all together. And what you were about to see is indication that it doesn't work all at the same time. I hadn't figured it. Everything screws up in the following video you're about to see. My camera cuts out at one point. Everything is herky-jerky and really weird. I got the sound lined up properly, and then in the end, I bring in my old webcam. It's a mess, but thank you so much for putting up with me. I just wanted you to know that what you're about to see is not the fault of whatever you're watching this on. It is completely the fault of everything I do. So like the image falls out, but fortunately the book itself is completely crystal clear the whole time. So you've got that going for you. But when things start screwing up and I don't call it out until later, just know it's because I'm trying to focus on too many things at once. So thank you so much for putting up with me. Thank you so much for watching. And next time I post a video, it'll be perfect. Just perfect. But again, this is just an example of my ADHD brain not knowing what to focus on it at once. So if you have ADHD, you'll understand. And if you don't, this is what we're dealing with all the time. All right? Thanks. Bye.
A family trip can be lots of fun. Our city visit has just begun. And that's the opening from our book this week. That's how it starts. Transition, I guess. Welcome back to Deep in Bear Country, a Berenstain Bearcast. I am your host, Phil Gonzalez, and I'm trying to live stream this right now, and I'm also trying to do the show right now at the same time. I don't know if this is working. I think I said that up top. I don't know if this is having any kind of an effect. I don't know if anyone's going to even care that I'm doing it this way, but I'm trying out a few new things. I'm playing around, and from what I can tell, my streaming software isn't working quite up to snuff, so already I can tell that I'm in a bit of a bind here because I'm not going to stop it now, but I can't imagine anybody wanting to watch this. But I am recording this, so we'll see. We'll see what I can fix. But are you ready to go to the city? Are you ready to hop in the car and then go to the airport and then fly in a plane and then land and then drive into the city and visit the big city? Are you ready to go? Da 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 da. Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I want to be a part of it. Big Bear City. That's right. This week's book is The Berenstain Bears Visit Big Bear City. I know we've gone to Big Bear City several times in the past. I know that we know from the chapter books that Big Bear City is the source of all evil, greed, and corruption in Bear Country. But every once in a while, our friends, the Berenstain Bears, every once in a while the Bear family hops in a car, hops on a plane, takes a trip into the big city. Sometimes the big city is just about an hour or so away. It's where the mall is. Sometimes it's so far away that you got to get on some kind of like super souped up hyperjet that's a half a block wide and spend hours up in the sky heading to your destination. I don't know. Who knows where Big Bear City? Actually, Big Bear City may always be in the same place, but where we are in Bear Country may float around. I don't know. Also, Bear Country, the name of the country, as we have proof of once again in this week's book. This is 2020's The Berenstain Bears Visit Big Bear City, and this is the most proof we've ever had that Big Bear City is Bear Country's version of New York City. It's laid out pretty blatantly. This is New York City. This is the big city that they've always gone to. It is Bear Country's Gotham. It is Bear Country's, in the daytime, Metropolis. Big Bear Bear City. But why are they going to Big Bear City? And wherefore? And who knows? Who cares? Why? Why? Well, this is the cover because I haven't shown it to you. But as you can see, there's what seems to be the Statue of Liberty. There's what seems to be the Chrysler Building. There's what seems to be the familiar New York skyline. There is a Goodyear blimp, even though if you grew up where I grew up, Spring, Texas, you would know that the Goodyear blimp used to be stationed in Spring, Texas. If you grew up in Spring, Texas in the 1980s and the early 90s, you got used to seeing the Goodyear blimp because its official hangar was in Spring, right off Louetta Road, right by the Lowe's Theater. So I don't know how else to say it, but this is the Good Bear blimp, which is odd because the Good Bear blimp doesn't really play a big part in this story. We do see tugboats, we see the East River, we see the Brooklyn Bridge, we see the Statue of Liberty, but we'll get their real names in a sec. We'll find out what's actually going on. This is not New York, remember. There is a bear holding up a torch, not a human woman. So hold on to your seats. We're about to enter a whole new alternate dimension, a whole new world that we've only dabbled in a little bit. So get ready, because here we go. Let's pull up the actual book here so this is the part I'd write to you. A family trip can be lots of fun. Our city visit has just begun. So the Bears are going to the Bear Country Airport to visit Uncle Bob and Aunt Gwen in Big Bear City. Now, right off the bat, the Bears are pulling into the airport on a little country road, and above them, probably 20 yards above their head, is a massive jumbo jet with a needle nose and like fins. Like, I don't understand. Like, Mike has drawn a jet here that looks unlike any human contraption that you can get in. It looks more like a weather airplane, like just because it has like this like needle nose, this point on the end of the nose. The tail looks weird. The wings look weird. I don't know what Mike was doing when he drew this picture. It's wild. But brother points at the airplane and he says, "That's a Bear Bus 2000," which means that it's some sort of, it's the equivalent to an Airbus, right? Like, that's the joke. It's a Bear Bus. There's no such thing as an Airbus 2000, but there are plenty of things called the Airbus. The Airbus comes in many different models, but the Airbus is generally what you take if you're doing a quick jaunt on a major airline. Your Airbus is going to have a couple of rows of seats, maybe 2 on one side, 3 on the other. It's going to be fairly cramped. That's what I think when I think Airbus. But what we're going to see is that Sister is right in this picture when she says it's humongous, because you get on the Bear Bus and holy goodness, it is 3 rows of seats. 3 in the middle, 3 on the left, 3 on the right. 2 aisles going to the front and back. Sister looked around at what seemed to be a big room full of seats. It looked a little like a movie theater. Yeah, if you're on a plane and it looks a little like a movie theater at all, if it looks at all like a movie theater, you're on a humongous plane. And that's what Sister says. It's humongous. Now, you wouldn't take a plane this size to a city if it was only an hour away by flight, right? Like, you wouldn't do that. That wouldn't make any sense to have a plane like that. Certainly not for just general passengers. I've flown on big planes, but it was when I was going across the country, at least. We fly from the Midwest to New York, and our planes are generally fairly small affairs because we're going from Minnesota to New York, and it's just a few hours in the air. And so if the Bears are anywhere in the Midwest, like we've believed them to be, I can't imagine them being far enough away to justify a plane of this size. I mean, it's really enormous. It's a huge plane. It doesn't even look like there's many people on it. Everyone's sort of casually entering as well. Also, the overhead compartments are about 5 feet above the heads of the passengers. Like, there is so much headroom on this, Papa could jump vertically and not touch the ceiling, even with his arms outstretched. This plane is ridiculous. It looks like, I don't know, like an old 747 with 2 floors. Like, it looks like that, except it was gutted to make room for more headspace. I don't know. Maybe this was built at a time when there were other sentient animals in Bear Country. Maybe there were giraffes. We don't know. We're not getting the answer to it. In any case, they take off. Brother looks out the windows and he's like, well, I don't know how do airplanes fly? Papa folds a paper airplane, holds it up, and he's like, look, the angle of attack and the airflow increases pressure under the airfoil and Brother's like, shut up, just shut it up. You're not, the whole point of me saying what keeps it up, you're supposed to just reassure me that we're safe. You're not supposed to actually get into the science of it, Papa, which it sounds like you don't actually know. It's a funny moment. I question its inclusion because this isn't a book about not being afraid of flight. This is a book about New York City. I don't know why Mike, this is a very short book. We are more than a third of the way through it already, by the by. I don't know why Mike spent a whole 2-page spread not explaining what a plane does, because we know it flies. realize. Like, it could have gone right from this to just them being in New York, meeting Uncle Bob at Big Bear Airport. Why they didn't call it Big Bearport, I don't know. It would be faster. Meeting Uncle Bob, it's bear country, so he's driving a convertible from like the 1940s. Big hugs go all around. They stow the luggage somewhere, I guess in his tiny trunk. Uncle Bob whisks them away. The tall buildings of Big Bear City looming up ahead. If you look, it shows you, it looks like they're going over the Brooklyn Bridge. And in the background, we see the skyline of Big Bear City. There's a couple of familiar looking buildings in the skyline. I'm sure if I was more of a New Yorker, if I was a New Yorker at all, I would recognize more of these. But there's definitely the Chrysler building, like right in the middle. There's a couple that could maybe be intended to be like just to the right of the Chrysler building is a building that might be supposed to be the Empire State Building, but it doesn't have the familiar looking like sort of step design of the Empire State Building. I don't know, but the Chrysler building is right in the middle. We'll talk more about the Brooklyn Bridge in a second. They're heading over the Brooklyn Bridge, except that it's not the Brooklyn Bridge, right? It's bear country. Things are named after bears. But it's not also the Bearclin Bridge or anything like that. The Grizzly Bridge. No, it's the Brooklyn Bear Bridge, one of the longest bridges in bear country. The Brooklyn Bear Bridge is a weird thing. So originally the Brooklyn Bridge was either the Brooklyn and Manhattan Bridge or the East River Bridge when it was first built starting in the 1800s. It wasn't like christened the Brooklyn Bridge until like the early 20th century, something like, I can't remember, but it was not called the Brooklyn Bridge for a long time because it connects Brooklyn with Manhattan. So there was this idea of like, well, what do we call it? Do we call it the Manhattan Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge? Which one is it going to be? It would make sense to name it after the river, except there were going to be more bridges. Do you name a bridge after one side or the other? But ultimately it became designated the Brooklyn Bridge. Amazing. If you ever get a chance to read the history of just the Brooklyn Bridge, it's fascinating. It's like corruption and politics and big dreams and big plans and lots of death. Just building the caissons on either side of the river was a massive engineering undertaking unlike anything that humanity had ever experienced. They had to build these gigantic caissons that then they had to sink and connect to the river bottom, but people had to be like in them to like when they went down, so they would pump air in to maintain the balance of pressure. So you're in this concrete square being lowered all the way to the base of the river with air being pumped in that's squeezing your head. It's so pressured, right? Also, nobody knew about the bends at this point. That's another thing to keep in mind. Apparently, from every like account of the people who went down there, it was literally like living in a nightmare. Also, one of the designers, the head engineer of the Brooklyn Bridge, like he got the bends and he ended up having to like supervise the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge from his apartment from a telescope, like Rear Window-esque. Fortunately, his wife was also like super well trained in architecture. And so she was able to be there and like supervise for him because she understood the math, she understood the engineering, she understood how it was supposed to all work. Brooklyn Bridge is a fascinating thing. And it's weird that it's called the Brooklyn Bear Bridge. Is Brooklyn in their world called Brooklyn Bear? Is that it? Is this the Brooklyn Bridge that only bears used to be allowed to cross? Is that it? We don't know. We don't get any answers, but we do know that Big Bear City is connected to a place called Brooklyn, or that Brooklyn is some sort of borough in Big Bear City, or there was somebody named Joe Brooklyn who built a bridge. We don't know. We're never going to find out. So they get out at a fancy apartment building. A fancy guy in a uniform helps them out. Brother's like, is this guy in the military? And he's like, no, it's our door bear. And I respect that. Not a doorman, not a door woman, a door bear. But they're staying in a pretty nice, looks like apartment. It's an apartment building with a canopy out in front. Looks familiar. Apparently they are staying with their uncle and aunt, their Uncle Bob, their Aunt Gwen. And this is where I have to stop and say, this is very familiar to me. So when we as a family traveled in Manhattan to visit family, we stay with Alana's aunt and uncle in their apartment on Manhattan Island, like right off Central Park. And you're going to see that like they're very close to their version of Central Park in this book. It's a very familiar feeling traveling with the family and staying in an apartment in New York owned by an aunt and uncle. But Aunt Gwen and Uncle Bob seem like very nice people, just like Alana's aunt and uncle, who have been on the show before. By the way, if you heard the episode, the Excuse Note, I believe they were on the Excuse Note episode a couple of years. So that was Uncle Evan and Aunt Merrill, and they're the ones we stay with in New York, just like Uncle Bob and Aunt Gwen. So Uncle Bob's like, let's go sightseeing. We'll take the sub. And sister's like, what's a subway? And Uncle Bob's like, I can't believe you don't know what a subway is. You are how old? In any case, it's a train that goes underground. You want another fascinating thing to read about? Read about the history of the New York City subway. Any subways, right? Like, this is again, another engineering marvel. Did you know that when the Brooklyn Bridge was being planned out, one idea was to not have a bridge, but was to instead have a tunnel that went underneath the river? But they were like, that's going to be too expensive. We'll do this cheaper option. It's a bridge. It'll cost us $5 million. It ended up costing over $15 million and quite a few human lives. But they still did the underground thing with the subway. I just couldn't when I was a kid and I would like, wait, they had subways back in the day? I couldn't imagine somebody having the idea to run a train underground and then people like getting together and actually figuring out how to do it without just literally the whole city collapsing and everybody dying. It just didn't make any sense to me. But oh boy, said brother, because he loves trains whether or not they're underground. So they head down a subway entrance into the subway station and they're like, wow, there's places to eat, there's places to shop, which is true, except that we see a bear in like a sort of a rough cap sitting in a plastic chair at a table. He's got a hamburger in front of him. He's sipping a cup of tea and he has a glass of milk, I guess. It's weird. Eating in the open air on a subway platform, because they are literally on the subway platform, is the grossest thing I can fathom. I posted this picture to Facebook and one of my friends said it made him want to, the idea of voluntarily opening your mouth and eating something on a subway platform made him want to vomit. Like, it's the most graphic. If you've ever been in a New York City subway, it's the most graphic thing ever drawn in a Berenstain Bears book. A guy eating a hamburger sitting on a plate on a table on a subway platform. And there's a newsstand and there's a subway. Very clean subway trains, just like they have in New York. If you go to New York, you're as long as somebody hasn't recently gone to the bathroom on the floor of the train, they are generally these days fairly clean experiences, especially as compared to like what people think of when they think of like the 1970s, 1980s, early 90s New York City subways that are like filthy and covered in graffiti. They do a fairly good job at keeping them clean, keeping them safe. You don't want to lick the poles or anything, but and wash your hands after you use the strap. Speaking of which, Mama's holding onto the strap because away they go. They head to their version of Times Square, but it's not called Times Square. It's called Bear Times Square. Like one word, Bear Times. So I assume that at some point the newspaper, I guess it would be the Big Bear Times newspaper had its offices in Times Square. Times Square is of course one of the oldest locations in New York. Even before it was New York and New Amsterdam, it was a convergence of several rivers. Then it became sort of this hub. Like in the 1800s, it became this hub of activity as entertainment and prostitution started moving, like, I think north from the south of the island. It all kind of converged where all these streets came together. So like Times Square, the area that became known as Times Square, frequently known as the Thieves' Den, not because that's where the thieves were necessarily, but because that's where the theaters were. The Times Square had just always been like the sort of the hub of iniquity in New York City. And then in the 1990s, that's when they started doing all the major reforms in the cities, and they got rid of all the porno theaters and all the sex shops and started making Times Square essentially a mall. It just became like a shopping, like with like, a lot of like screens, and it became very family friendly, except there's a lot of like Hostel Elmos around there, I guess. But that's Times Square. Now in this image, Bear Times Square. Oh, and it was named after the New York Times. Like the New York Times used to have its offices there. They're not there anymore, but they used to have the offices there. And they just changed it. They called it Times Square. There was I can't even think of what the reason. There was a very specific reason. The owner of the New York Times did something or other, and they changed the name because they were like, "Thank you so much." But it also like they built like the first like major billboard was like right there, Times Square. It goes way back. So we see some signs. We see signs for Baringdales, which is clearly Bloomingdale's. Bergdorf, which is clearly Bergdorf. Grisette, which I guess is supposed to be the Gazette. I can't really tell. Bruins Chic. There's all these signs. Now Bloomingdale's and Bergdorf are not located right on Times Square. They're not right there. In fact, you're gonna have to it's a little bit of a hike to get to either one of those. Oh, I say one. There's a couple of locations, but there's nothing like right in Times Square. You're not going to like be standing in Times Square and there's like a Hostel Elmo and there's Bloomingdale. So this is a different arrangement of buildings, of addresses than we get in America. This is Bear Country. But also we have performers, we have buskers, we have a guy playing sax, we have a woman on drums. I don't know what they're playing, but I'm sure it's good. What a crowd, Mama says. And And Uncle Bob says, yeah, Bear Times Square is the busiest place in Big Bear City. And Papa says, I can believe it. Which is true. And there's cars and taxis, and it looks like an officer, just like Officer Marguerite. And there, I don't know what year this is supposed to be in. Again, it's bear country. It's sort of trapped somewhere between 1920 something and today. There's a lot of like newsboy caps, a lot of vests, and a lot of men dressed a lot nicer than you'd expect. There is a police officer in a pencil skirt and a rakish cap directing traffic. So something or other. I don't know. Who knows? Then they go to a park. It's a park, but it's clearly Central Park, which I guess is right off. It says they make their way through the crowds to a wide and grassy park, which means that in Big Bear City, their version of Central Park is right off Times Square. When we stay with Meryl and Evan, Central Park is just a few blocks from their house. So I don't exactly understand the geography of Big Bear City, but I know it's Central Park, because it looks like Central Park. They are riding in a horse-drawn carriage around the park. Please do not do this. Those horses are not treated well. We see people picnicking. We see a person jogging. We see a guy walking a few dogs. We see a woman feeding the birds. And we see the Bethesda Fountain, except it's a bear, and it's not called the Bethesda Fountain. But it's clearly Bethesda Fountain. It also doesn't look exactly like Bethesda Fountain. The base, the fountain part of the fountain is not as tall. It seems to be more in a naturally occurring lake than in like the Bethesda. What is the Bethesda Fountain is not just the fountain. Bethesda Fountain is like a full, it is the Bethesda, terrace and fountain. The terrace was actually built first. Fascinating thing about Bethesda Fountain, something I really did not know anything about, was that Bethesda Fountain was designed, I believe it was the first, where is it? Instruction. The Bethesda Fountain, also called the Angel of the Waters, here it is, was designed by Emma Stebbins, the first woman to receive a public commission for a major work of art in New York City. So I started reading about Emma Stebbins. I was like, what was Emma Stebbins up to? What did she do? And Emma Stebbins was born in 1815. She died in 1882. Emma Stebbins, though, she was friends with and studied with Harriet Hosmer, who was a leader of like a group of expatriates living in Rome, who studied, and Harriet Hosmer was a neoclassical sculptor, just this crazy, just celebrated sculptor. She was the cousin of William H.C. Hosmer, the poet, and the actress Jean Hosmer. And she was, if you look at pictures of this woman, Harriet Hosmer, just amazing. She lived quite a life. First of all, her parents were like, we can tell you're interested in a lot of things. You're interested in sculpture, you're interested in travel, you're interested in dressing like a man. You know what? We totally support you, but you're not going to be able to have all that in America. So feel free to travel the world and learn to be a real sculptor, a marble sculptor, dress however you want to dress. Like her friends were like, she dressed like a man, she dated women, she had all kinds of affairs with women, she had long-term relationships with women. This is like 1870s. And people were just like, you're awesome, Harriet. Please teach us all how to sculpt. Teach us all how to be awesome. Hang out with Thackeray. Hang out with Nathaniel Hawthorne. We're all good friends, studying and hanging out in our own. Yes, Nathaniel Hawthorne said she was very peculiar, but she seemed to be her actual self and nothing affected or made up. So that for my part, I gave her full leave to wear what may suit her best and to behave as her inner woman prompts. Nathaniel Hawthorne. So like there was this whole other world going on that this was not even the woman who did Bethesda Fountain. That was Emma Stebbins, who was friends with her and studied under her, did who knows what else. But yeah, designed the statue of Bethesda Fountain. The fountain part was designed by someone else. And it's built, and you can visit Bethesda Fountain. It's right there. This brought up a question online, which is, because a central part of the play, Angels in America, is set around Bethesda Fountain. John McCoy, who I used to do Click It Cast, asked, he's like, does this mean that there's a version of Angels in America in Bear Country? To which I said, I don't know. But it did get me thinking. So does Angels in America exist in Bear Country? Is there Angels in America in Bear Country? I would say yes. I'm not sure though. I mean, I would think so, except that the whole religious thing, I'm not sure what the religious situation in Bear Country is. And Angels in America is very much a Jewish and Mormon story. So I don't know why we don't ever hear Jewish people mentioned in Bear Country. We certainly have never heard them talk about Mormons. So I don't know. Does Angels in America exist? Is Tony Kushner a thing? Who knows? Was there a rewritten version of West Side Story? I couldn't even begin to tell you. But then they take a ride all the way to the foot of a very tall building. It's the Empire Bear Building. And at the top is a flag. Okay, so it's clearly supposed to be the Empire State Building. Except it's called the Empire Bear Building. Okay, was New York referred to as the Empire Bear? Like, that makes the least sense here. Because the Empire State Building is named for the Empire State. Not referring to New York, or wherever they are, as the Empire Bear. Are they... we know that states exist in Bear Country. We know that it is a nation divided into states because they've gone to Texas. Unless, of course, Texas is still an independent country in Bear World. We don't know. Empire Bear Building, named after, presumably, some sort of empire of the bears, I guess? When it was built, they were probably like, we're celebrating the current bear empire in our building. And there it is. It looks like the Empire State Building. I assume Bear Kong climbed it in a movie at some point. And then high on the observation deck, they see for miles and miles. So they're at the Empire Bear Building. They look out, and there in the bay is the Statue of Liberty, but it's a bear. Also, it's not the Statue of Liberty. It is the Statue of Liberty, which is wild because liberty is a word. Liberty is not a proper name. It is not a designation. It is a concept, an idea. A concept, an idea that exists in the world of the Berenstain Bears. However, when they designed this statue and they put it up and they were like, let's name it. They said, we're not going to call it the Statue of Liberty. It does not stand for liberty. It does say that she welcomes all who come to Bear Country, not America, seeking a new, better life. But we say she stands for Liberty, which means to me that they were like, not only is this the concept of liberty, this is the concept of liberty as it pertains to bears in Bear Country. So we are going to change the very concept of liberty to make it pertain solely to bears. It's the Statue of Liberty. I don't have anything else to add to that except that I think it's weird. I think it's an odd one. I'm going to see if I can trick my computer into thinking that I'm back, into thinking that I can be seen. Does that make sense? Does my computer think that I can be seen? No, it doesn't think that I can be seen. I don't know why. I have no idea why everything shut off, but we're giving up on that. We're giving up on that. You can't see me. You absolutely cannot see me. I'm gone. Let's finish this up. So, they go to see a musical. They go to see a Broadway musical. They go to see Les Miserables, but they end up seeing what is called Les Miserables. Les Miserables. Again, how does French work? Misérable, the wretched. Les Miserables is the wretched, the unfortunate, the disadvantaged. That's the whole point of the book. Les Miserables does not mean anything, except that it could mean, I don't know, the unbearables, maybe? Like people that you can't stand to be. I don't know. But it is Les Mis. We see the French flag on stage. We see a guy in a top hat. Must be a Thénardier, I guess. And it says the show is spectacular. A huge cast sang and danced their hearts out for hours. And you know what? You go see Les Mis. They do sing and dance for hours. I don't really think of Les Mis as a dance show. So, take that for what it's worth. Not exactly, like the big time fun dance show Les Mis doesn't exist. But yeah. So I think I got this work. Not that it matters, but Les Miserables. So they go see Les Miserables. I do wonder what the Bears version of Les Mis is like. I wonder what the plot is like. I wonder if the Bears do the Bears enjoy it. It just seems like a dicey prop. It's not. Les Mis is cool. It's not the most family friendly show. I mean, it's not a family unfriendly show. But in any case, they go to see Les Mis. It's a good time is had by all. They have a wonderful time, and then it's just done. They hop back on the plane. They go home. There's no place like home. Like that's it. That is the end of the book. They're like, home, done. We're done. We've seen New York. We saw a play. We saw the Empire State Building. We saw the Statue of Liberty. We've seen New York. That's it. You're about to see me again in one sec. I managed to get my webcam working. It's a very different experience. I managed to get my webcam, but it's a different camera. So So I'm back, but I'm looking at a different camera now because I couldn't get my other camera just pooped out on me. These are new things I'm learning. I'm learning how to deal with. But you know, if you've watched this at all, thank you for putting up with me, I guess. That's it. That's the Berenstain Bears visit Berenstain. This was a wild time because I have a whole new setup. I have a whole new camera setup. I have a whole new arrangement here. And instead of making sure everything was cool as I went along, before I started, I was kind of teaching myself as I went along. But that's okay because the energy was up and I had a good time, and I hope everyone else had it. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being a part of this coming up on 10-year-long experiment of Deep in Bear Country. This is episode like 449, I think, or 446 that I'm doing, and that doesn't count like any of the special episodes, any of the collector episodes that I didn't number the same way. I've probably done almost 500 episodes by this. I'm coming up on 500 episodes, like if you count everything in toto. So thank you so much. Just thank you so much for being here. It's really hard to see me because I had my lighting set up for a completely different camera. There, now I'm spooky. I've got spooky lighting on. But I can't prop it up, so forget it. Spooky lighting on me as I discuss the Berenstain Bears. If you're listening to this at home, you can't see what I'm doing, and I'm not going to cut this because I don't care that much. But thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And keep on keeping on. And I'll see you all next time, deep in Bear Country.